Hello, everyone, and very good morning and very good afternoon or evening from wherever you will be watching this YouTube video. Once again, we have with us Mr. Anuradha Ranasinghe, who resides in Netherlands, and he is in fact a computer or engineer. And then he has taken himself on a path to what we call freedom, the nirvana, and there is a lot that our audience can learn from him through his own experience. And then he calls himself a spiritual artist, which I think is very appropriate for the work that he has done so far. And it is always appropriate and prudent to hear things from what we call horse's mouth, the one who is a practitioner, who has experience, and then sharing of such experience rather than taking directly from the book and say, okay, this is what is stated in scriptures and books, and then you follow. Rather than doing that, I mean, okay, knowing what is stated in the scripture is also good, but at the same time, the practicing of Dhamma, practicing of what is recommended is very crucial in understanding. So today's topic that we have selected is understanding Buddhist philosophical concepts through meditation. Now, as you know, meditation is said to be heart of Buddhist philosophy, and so there are various types of meditation coming under Samatha, Vipasana, and Anuradha is the best person who can discuss this subject with us. And I have no doubt that this interview will benefit our audience at the end of the session. So Anuradha, once again, welcome to this session, and you are our guest resource person. And another thing is that these are a series of discussions that we are going to do with Anuradha Ranasinghe, and this is the second one that we did. The first one we did it in Sinhala language for the benefit of those who are not very familiar with English. So today we are doing it in English so that it becomes, there's a balance in what we are trying to do. Right, Anuradha, I will once again welcome you to this forum, and let me ask you the first question. Philosophical concepts. First of all, just give us an introduction of these concepts that you want to communicate to our audience.
Yeah. So first of all, thanks for the brief introduction about me. So I would like to introduce myself as a spiritual artist, and I was a practitioner of this an authentic spiritual lineage from Sri Lanka, which was founded by this enlightened master called D.A. Jayasuriya in 1970s. So then coming back to the topic, well, compared to other religious traditions, I think one specific thing that we notice in Buddhist tradition is it is very rich in different concepts and conceptualizing the dynamics of our human body and mind. And based on that, and also based on the existential phenomena, Buddhism has laid out many philosophical concepts. I think also in our last meeting, in the last video, we briefly discussed about the concept of non-duality, which is a main philosophical concept that we find in Buddhism. And perhaps it is better to start with this concept by giving a small introduction to that. because nowadays it is re-emerging in spiritual arena. For an example, in let's say in New Age spiritual movements such as radical non-duality. So when we talk about the non-duality, I think it has been like, I think it was even spoken also in pre-Vedic historical religions, pre-Vedic traditions. If we go back to Upanishad traditions, which was founded even before Gautam Buddha in India, even they have spoken about non-duality. In those traditions, the non-duality was very briefly and very simply explained as the ceasing of the separation between the human, between the practitioner and the God. But after Gautam Buddha's arrival in India, he revolutionized the whole idea, because he wanted to present an atheistic view to the society, because he wanted to actually even like go against some some of these theological ideas, so that a new social reform can be established. And if we look at the different Buddhist traditions, starting from, let's say, the Theravada to Mahayana and also to Vajrayana, non-duality has been spoken in different ways. So in Theravada practice, we basically see that the non-duality, the concept or the idea of non-duality, is presented as the lacking of the inherent existence. The lacking of the inherent existence of the individual. Theravada practice is, it's almost about, it's always about eradicating our suffering, right? So then we need to see where this suffering emerges from. It is basically because of our clinging, our own clinging to this self, which appears as the self-identity. So in Theravada Buddhist practices, especially in mindfulness meditation and vipassana practices, what we try to do is we try to identify this clinging and try to identify the lacking of this inherent self nature in us, so that we can be free from suffering. So that's about the Theravada practice. Do you also like to talk about the other traditions like Mahayana and Tantrayana?
Anuradha, I think it would be, last time you actually differentiated Theravada and Mahayana.
Yeah.
But you didn't say anything about Vajrayana. So briefly, Theravada is said to be or Hinayana, which they call its original form of Buddhism that has been documented. Yeah. And subsequently edited and amended by Venerable Buddha Ghosha. Okay, that history is known. Mahayana, the way you expressed the other day was it's more of a word of mouth tradition that spread across, and then it went into more of a practice rather than kind of memorizing, see. And Vajrayana, if you can just mention about Vajrayana, that because not many people are very familiar with, the difference between because a lot of people think that Vajrayana is also part of Mahayana.
Yes, well, in fact, it is true, because Vajrayana practice has also been motivated by this Bodhisattva activities, okay. Bodhisattva motivation. So the concepts related to Bodhisattva practice and cultivating merits and paramitas, they have been already explained and have been practiced in Mahayana tradition. But the practice actually it can span across many lifetimes of the practitioner. So the masters of all these traditions, they wanted to find an accelerated way to reach Buddha. So therefore, Vajrayana defines some accelerated meditative and yogic methods to quickly reach the Buddha with the help of a guru.
Okay.
So that is the main difference.
So rather, it's an accelerated version of Mahayana, okay. Okay, that's Now, I think from here onwards, let's get into a little hardball because whether it is the spiritual seekers in Sri Lanka or the spiritual seekers overseas, there is a strong desire that, you know, they have gone through, especially people who are in the middle age and, you know, who are reaching like my age, you know, we have gone through life. We have gone through, and then there is this understanding of suffering. You know, whatever the way we look at it, there is this underpinning suffering which no one can deny, you know, whether it's a physical or psychological, and at the end, anyway, you have this fear of death also, which you can't overcome, you know, at the end. And it's more than the fear of the death. It's, you know, what am I going to lose? You know, the things that I'm going to lose, and what will happen, you know, after my death, you know, things like that. And this is the reason why now there is so much of kind of interest in getting into practices. Therefore, I think it's good if you can tell us now, for such people, spiritual seekers. Now let's forget about various religions and all. Now you are getting into a practice where you are looking for something called enlightenment or freedom or nirvana or whatever, because of some understanding about the suffering. Because, okay, we have gone through our life, and okay, so what, you know, and you know, we have had pleasures and we have acquired whatever we wanted to acquire in life, so what? Now anyone who is entering this spiritual field, there is always something that I'm looking for something. Now initially, when such people approach you, for example, how would you guide them? And then that's a good start, because, you know, it will be very useful to our audience.
So it's a good question. Yes. So as I told you also in the previous video, that we cannot really give generalized solution to everybody. Different people have different troubles, but I think the question we have in our life is, what would happen at the death, and what would happen? What would happen to our loved ones after our passing? So this has been the main question in our life, and that's why we try to find the answer by doing many things outside. But the real answer to this question, it lies in within us. So we need to actually go for an inward journey. Otherwise, we cannot really see this the existence of this self and the suffering that emerges from this self. But
Anuradha,
now,
let me interrupt you. No, it's very clear. Turn the attention to yourself, because what you are looking for, if you try to look for anything from outside, it's a futile thing. So inward journey, turn attention to yourself. Now that message is very, very clear, very transparent, and that's what is coming from you, right? Let's move from there.
And then so let's say when somebody comes to us, let's say with some emotional problems or maybe some mental problems, then really we need to go into his shoes and try to understand his situation. So as I told you last time, maybe giving the meditation in the first place would not work for him. In such a case, in our practice, there are some methods that we can help these kind of people, these kind of profiles. So for an example, there are certain yogic methods that we can actually use to, let's say, reduce the mental pressure. And from that point, after this person gets, stable to a certain extent, then we can actually expose him to the meditation. So likewise, what we offer in our practice is a gradual process, and it certainly depends on the personal situation, personal circumstances.
Then now the second message again is clear. There is no kind of a panacea for all ills for everyone. It's just that it's an individualistic situation. Each individual needs to be given a separate recipe or prescription depending on where that person is placed in. Okay, so that's the second message. So very powerful. The first one is an inward journey. The second one is there is no general message. It needs to be dealt with individually. So that once again, it's clear. And then the third one, of course, you said the background. You must prepare the person rather than straight away offering meditation. Now,
Exactly.
yeah, if you can now move on from there, like the background, how to settle that person, and which type of meditation that are available, and which type of meditation that would suit them.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I think it's better to explain this by giving a specific example.
Right.
So, suppose that a person comes to us who has a very low esteem and very less confidence about his life and also his future goals. So then we will first look into his, the nature of his mind, because sometimes these type of profiles have their problems in their subconscious programming due to different social conditioning, due to the family background. So then by sometimes doing talking therapy, or sometimes by doing meditation directly with this person, we can identify where the problem is. So subconscious programming is just one way that we can really deal with in this type of situation. That is one way. And another fascinating thing is some of these problems can be also related to the energy system of the person, energy system of the human.
Okay.
So you know that in our energy system, we have this so-called dominant 7 chakras. So the lower 3 chakras are usually related to these type of problems.
Okay.
Sometimes by doing chakra balancing, we can also get better results. So there are different ways. Sometimes these ways can be addressed in mind level, like subconscious programming. Sometimes these issues can be addressed in energy level.
So there has to be some kind of a proper understanding of the person who is looking for spiritual development. So first of all, the guru requires little time to understand where the pupil is placed in.
Exactly.
Right. And now there is something which is a very common problem among meditators. They lose control of thoughts, and these thoughts come very fast, and then we don't know where they emerge from. And the observation of many meditators are saying, look, sometimes these thoughts, you have no way of finding where they are emerging from, and then your focus is completely lost because of the generation of thoughts so fast. You get distracted, and that jeopardizes the entire meditation attempt. Now, these are very common thing that is coming from most of the practitioners.
So
how would you respond to that initially? Now, when after preparing the person who is coming for remedies, he will still run into these issues with regard to meditation, the thoughts process.
I think it's a very common problem we see in meditators, as you mentioned. So many meditators are familiar with inhale, exhale, anapanasati type of meditation techniques. But developing the calm, abiding concentration from this, and also going to what we call access concentration, it's not that easy. It takes time, because having these uncontrollable thought processes in our mind is natural to us, because that's the nature of our mind. So to answer that question, well, there are two ways I would address this question. if a meditator comes to me with his own preference of a specific meditation practice, then I will tell him to first have a relaxed meditation posture. Sometimes the posture and also the physical the physical arrangement also matters. And sometimes due to these misalignments in the spine, some people cannot really focus on in meditation. There are many issues related to that. So in that case, I would even don't dare to observe his physical body and gradually take him through the calm abiding nature. But there is another sure remedy to this problem, which is by activating certain chakras in their body. So we know that there is a chakra called third eye or the Anya chakra, and this Anya chakra is responsible for handling or regulating the energy in the consciousness realm. So the consciousness realm is the energy area that is between the forehead and the top of our head.
Okay.
And and the energy that governs here actually generates our thought process.
Okay.
So if we can activate the third eye chakra, there is a high chance that we can have a very calm, abiding nature developed from it.
How do you do that? This arousing the chakras. How is the process works?
Yeah. So in our meditation lineage, we have this special technique called samadhi transmission, and we can also use that. But before that, we need to thoroughly evaluate the person who comes for the meditation. So to do that, he has to be with me in the close proximity, and by doing meditation with me, I can raise the energies. That is one way. But there are also specific sadhanas to activate these chakras. Yeah.
Would you describe sadhanas, because these may not be a very familiar word for especially the Sri Lankans or Sri Lankan Buddhists? What does it mean?
Yeah, so the sadhana is a specific yogic activity that we can perform to, let's say, activate certain energy centers in our body. So for instance, if we look at our energy system, the energy system also has a non-dualistic point, which is the Ajna chakra, the third eye chakra. We say that the feminine and the masculine nature in our energy system gets united, converges at this Ajna chakra. That means we energetically go beyond the duality at this point.
Okay.
Yeah. So by training our mind to see the non-duality, everything around us, also in the existence and also between us and the others, sometimes this energy center can be activated.
Okay.
But there are also some physical postures too. Yeah.
Anuradha, I must relate a particular experience that I had long years ago, of course. When I was meditating, it was basically anapanasati, nothing more than that. Then there were some experiences, you are experiencing the bliss of the space, things like that.
Yeah.
And then later on you get addicted to that, you get hooked on to that. As you want to sit, you want to go into that sphere of and then eventually it led to a kind of a complication. I have had squeezing effect, and that was so at that time I felt, this was some 20 years ago, I felt that I attempted this without guidance, without getting any. And then later, when I consulted a yogi, one Swami from Ramakrishna Mission, and he said, stop it immediately, because otherwise you will go off your head, something like that. Yeah. So anyone who is attempting to this type of things should be also careful, isn't it? I'm relating to my own experience,
of course, anybody who wishes to do meditation with, let's say, by means of activating chakras, has to be careful. Most likely your case could be related to the sinus cavities, right? Because if your meditative concentration gets deepened, if this chakra, the third eye chakra, is about to open, sometimes you get the pressure points here.
Yeah. It's very like squeezing, and then you can't.
Because it's normal if sometimes when the chakras get activated. So that's why we say that it's better to do meditation with an experienced person. But sometimes after this painful period, things get resolved by themselves.
Yeah, but then that you don't know you are, and also that blissful experience that also vanished. That didn't last. Yeah, afterwards. Okay, right. Now tell us now, whatever the teachings you have, is it in line with the samatha and vidarshana that are taught in the Theravada tradition? Is it the same or is it different?
Okay, well, I think let's put it in this way. Now, we mentioned about the chakra activation. So the chakra activation, specifically this Anya chakra, is really helpful to go into subtle mental states, like in samatha, the forms and formless absorptions. Very easily you can go into these samatha meditation states. But the vipassana practice is something that we have to do by heart, by ourselves, by practicing our own mind. Because the vipassana, the fruition mind that we expect to see, we expect to experience in each Margapala stage, that can only be achieved, that can only be arrived with the practice of vipassana. Yes, our practice is based on both of these.
Okay. Now, in vipassana, the way we understood it was, it's the vipassana, the meditation which focuses around anicca, dukkha, anatta. Yeah. Is that the same that you are interpreting, or is there is it the same?
Well, some people say that they project this anicca, dukkha, anatma, trilakshana to the outside objects in their vipassana meditation.
Okay.
But in my opinion, it should be an inward projection, because our thought process is the very source of our suffering. So if we can really observe the anicca, dukkha, anatma of the thoughts themselves, then that is where the suffering will end.
Okay. And what about the walking meditation, for example? Now, there are various types. Even some of the meditation, there are 40 types and described in Buddhist scriptures. Now, it is very necessary for you to identify the characteristics of the person, as you said at the beginning, before you recommend the type of the meditation. What about a person? Now, is it necessary for a person to observe certain virtues before you enter the sphere of meditation? Like, you have to be free from raga thoughts or dvesha thoughts, or is there a prerequisite before you, and how would you describe them?
Yeah, I would like to align it to the typical Buddhist teachings. So in typical teachings, we say that it starts from Sila, Samadhi, Prajna. So the real wisdom actually comes to you, emerges to you after the Samadhi, after the right meditation. But for the prerequisites, I think at least we should have an understanding of the impermanence, about the physical and worldly phenomena, right? Only that kind of understanding will lead us to meditation techniques like, let's say, vipassana. But for samatha, that kind of prerequisite is not strictly necessary. But if you need to follow the traditional order, then knowing the impermanent nature is, I think, it's better.
Basically, when you say the nature of impermanence, is the understanding that everything is, or rather nothing is static. Everything is moving and nothing remains permanent. I think that's the one which is really causing suffering, isn't it? It's because you want to retain something as it is, or you want to acquire something which you believe will remain permanently with you, you know, things like that. So that understanding is very important in the Vipassana meditation, the nature of impermanence. And what about the nature of dukkha, which I mentioned at the beginning, you know, I mean, when you say anicca dukkha, you know, the dukkha satya, what the Buddha saw was, you know, dukkha is all over. Would you mind elaborating that?
Yeah, so to me, dukkha really means the resistance to change. Because the only constant thing that we see in this existence is the change. And therefore, everything is impermanent. But we resist in change. We resist changing ourselves, our character, and also our livelihood according to the relative situations. So that gives rise to suffering. And then understanding, that's why I mentioned. So having this understanding is the prerequisite for any meditation practice. Because otherwise, what would happen is we do meditation, we have calm abiding nature in samatha meditation, and then we are really happy about the blissful nature. But in real life, the dynamic changing nature, we are failed.
Exactly. And right now we come into the most subtle concept of the philosophical concept of Buddhism, which is the notion of Anata, or they call it Anatma. Now, this has been interpreted, or rather, this is interpreted by many people in different ways. Some people say, well, you know, Buddha came up with the notion of Anata to show that there is no Atman going from one life to another. And then some people are saying, well, you know what Buddha meant was there is no permanent self. Then you are bringing the touch of anicca also into that. But as you know, the modern non-duals, the modern speakers, they very candidly emphasize that there is no person, that there is no person called self. Now that's the radical non-dualism that we are talking about. Now, which one would you opt to choose in your teachings and through your practice? How do you identify the no self concept which is taught in Buddhist philosophy?
Yeah. So I think we have come to a very important point. So there has been, you know, a lot of misinterpretations about this no self teaching. But Buddha never denied that we are reborn, right? He always, you know, mentioned, and even in his Jataka stories, he mentioned about his past lives. But the question is, there is no fixed entity that is moving from this life to the next life. So having this idea or the notion of permanent self, it doesn't make sense, and it also leads to suffering. So I think that's why Buddha simply abolished that kind of idea. But then the question is, how do we really experience that, and how do we really practice this? In my opinion, Buddha had come to this realization after he really progressed through, you know, meditation to a greater extent. So with his, you know, previous teachers, I think he had already reached up to all those form and formless absorptions, and then he also had reached this clear light state. Only when we have that kind of experience, then we get synchronized to the existence. And then that synchronization gave him the idea that, okay, after this point, there is no permanent self in you any longer. You are part of this existential phenomena.
Mm-hmm.
So then there's actually no person. You simply have to, move along in the current, move forward with the current.
So when you say the emergence of the self, now a lot of people think, okay, self, I have a body, so that's my body.
Yeah.
And then the thoughts, one will say, okay, these are my thoughts. So it's my body, and my thought obviously is a result of the acceptance of someone called me. So that's myself. Now, it's like, I think Descartes, right, who said, I think and therefore I am, and that kind of philosophical things. But I'm not going that far. What I'm saying is this understanding, this body, people, they are saying, this is my body and this is my mind. Now, this is why I think there's one a Zen teacher, the practice itself, in the meditation itself, they say the meditation itself is based on, this is not my body and this is not my mind. I think it's like a mantra kind of a thing, this Maharishi Mahesh. Now, when you say no self-concept, then what you're suggesting is Lord Buddha mentioned many combination of factors which create the notion of self. Is that what you were explaining?
Well, that is in the dynamic nature of our mind.
Okay.
So, into the dynamic nature, the concept of I or the concept of self, it exists with external factors. So, for an example, when we see a person, let's say we had some past in business in the past, and he was, let's say, an enemy of us. And then, as soon as we see this person, then quickly, depending on our tendencies, we get an idea that, okay, so this is my enemy, and with respect to that, the self notion also arises. So that is the dynamic nature of our mind. But there is also a static nature to our mind, in which the Buddha experienced the oneness, or the clear light, or his self dissolved in that very meditative experience. So the lacking of the self, or the lacking of inherent existence of the self, should be experienced in both ways, in my opinion, dynamically as well as in deep meditative states.
Because there was this criticism, even in Buddha Ghosha's this Visuddha Magga, this Sila Samadhi Prajna, the path to enlightenment or path to purification. Somewhere down the line, he had mentioned that there is no thinker behind the thought. And then a lot of people couldn't understand. I remember when we entered this Buddhist discussions long time ago, some 30 odd years, when someone raised this question, why did Buddha Ghosatero say something like this? There's no thinker behind the thought. At that time, of course, this no self thing was surfacing. However, it's the general question is, okay, if there is no self, who would achieve nirvana, and why do you want to seek enlightenment in the first place if there is no person? So this is why the most non-duals, they bring in this concept of oneness, and then compare it to that oneness to more of a dream. So inside a dream, everything is real, but when you awake from the dream has never taken place. Now, that's a reasonable example. Now, if you are to describe this, who achieves this finally if there is no one, it's a very, very crude question, but you try and respond, because these are the questions that are emerging from the society among the seekers.
Yeah, I think that's a very valid question. So as I told you before, here the problem is this: we try to practice on this no self principle without doing what Buddha had done at the very beginning. So Buddha had also followed this eightfold noble path, right? So with the help of samatha and vipasana, he came to realize that his own consciousness is not the true consciousness, and he transcended that with the help of these two meditation techniques. And then only he has actually arrived to the conclusion that there is no really person, because he was totally synchronized to this existence.
Mm-hmm.
And then he declared that, okay, there is no point of clinging to five aggregates, because there is no permanent self to sustain or to survive. But if we only take that idea and not doing the practice required in the Eightfold Noble Path, to me, it doesn't make any sense.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
So that's
and
go
also
on.
and also to answer that Visuddhi Marga problem. So why there is no thinker behind our thoughts? Yeah. Before enlightenment, when we have only a gross level of mind, then we are too much identified with our thoughts. So then there is no separation at all between ourselves and our thought. Simply, we are our thoughts. But with the help of meditation, but with the help of deep awareness practice, then we make a significant separation between the thoughts and ourselves. Ourself here is our awareness.
Okay.
So there is actually no thinker, but the dynamic thoughts just sporadically appearing to this awareness.
Okay.
Mm.
You made a nice point. We are our thoughts, but we are really our awareness, not really thoughts. And that's a good thing. I mean, isn't that what we call consciousness? This one is conscious. You see, it's if you are conscious, you will have the ability even to observe your thoughts. When you're conscious, your thoughts can be watched.
Exactly.
And right. And coming to our topic, the meditation, and then trying to understand these realities through meditation. Now, for instance, meditation that are driving towards this dhyana or jhanas, and there are so many levels of jhanas. And the story goes that the Buddha, in fact, tried these and experienced these, and then Lord Buddha felt that these jhanas will not take me to what I am looking for. Yeah. So now this jhana-based meditation, do you advocate that the people who meditate should go through that path and then reach nirvana, or is it a separate vidarshana, and you can even completely avoid jhana and then look for what you are looking for? Yeah,
I advocate the usual procedure. First, to cultivate jhanic states. When you have the jhanic states, the watching of your thoughts is easier, the thing you mentioned.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, because then after you cultivating these jhanas for let's say for a sufficiently long time, then your awareness becomes so subtle that you can see these dynamic sporadical changes in your thought process in a very subtle way.
So does it mean that you advocate whatever the meditation type that you are recommending, these jhanas that, the Pratama jhana, Dvitiya jhana, things like that. And when you have reached them, it is easier for such people to proceed from there towards enlightenment. Is that what you said, or is it different?
It is what I'm saying. So I think, in my opinion, the subtlest way of practicing vipassana is chittanupassana, right? In thought level.
Okay.
Yeah, but to really observe this thought process, you also need to have a very subtle awareness, and that subtle awareness can only be developed by having these jhanic states.
You just mentioned chittanupassana. Now, when you say Satara Satipatthana, you have the Kayanupassana, Vedanupassana. Can you just describe how the Satara Satipatthana meditation can be performed?
Yeah. So there are 4 different ways, right? So when we bring our focus to our body, the physical body, that's what we call the Kayanupassana. But Kayanupassana is not actually working for everybody. Some people really have difficulties of grounding themselves to the physical body. So this is what we call the grounding principle in Buddhist meditation. And then we have the Dhammanupassana, the impermanent nature. We contemplate on the impermanent nature of the phenomena. I think there's a relation between Dhammanupassana and this Trilakshana.
Okay.
And the Chittanupassana is what I usually recommend for my practitioners, so that they can monitor these subtle mental activities.
And what about Vedanupassana?
Yeah, so the Vedananupassana is about monitoring your subtle body sensations. Actually, when we do meditation, don't you think that sometimes we have to do all of these things together?
You can't divide, basically, you can't
Exactly.
compartmentalize. I don't think it's possible. Yes, you are right.
Yeah, naturally it emerges. When we do meditation, let's say in a retreat or something, then we would come across the body sensation, pains, and naturally our awareness will move to that. Right. So, in my opinion, all of these the anupassanas are like like they come together, they go together. It just just because we want to express it systematically that we have divided it.
Yeah, just for academic purpose, for people to understand. It doesn't. Yes, I think it was very useful because samatha is basically settling or calming or tranquilizing. You're getting ready, but vipassana is basically trying to understand the true nature of life and existence. And now, if anyone comes and asks you, now you have studied Theravada, you have studied Mahayana, Vajrayana, all these. I'm not trying to set one against the other, but it's all 3. Again, as you rightly said, these are things that you cannot divide and say, okay, this is Theravada, this. Finally, these are different ways through which you can get to the goal. Isn't that?
2 different goals. If your motivation is to become a bodhisattva to help numerous sentient beings, then Tantrayana yogic methods are really helpful to accelerate your progression.
And just a clarification, this Vajrayana is the Tantrayana, is it the same or is it? Okay.
They are same.
Because last time you mentioned the word Tantrayana, and I was wondering whether it was Vajrayana. So now the origin of these Theravada retained in countries like Sri Lanka and Thailand and maybe Bhutan, I'm not sure. And whereas Mahayana went into some other regions. And now most of these non-dual speakers, they have been to India. And they have met people like Ramana Maharishi, and then there is this Papaji, and then, the disciples of Ramana Maharishi. And then the same non-dual teachers give a lot of credit to Lord Buddha. And as the founder of, this non-duality and no self-concepts and so on. Now, why is that these Westerners who have now become preachers in their own countries, they haven't visited Sri Lanka? Now, this bothers me. They have gone to places like Rishikesh and then Tiruvannamalai and wherever these spiritual practices take place. But I do not know why they have not been influenced by the Theravada tradition in Sri Lanka. Now, this is a bit of a controversial question, and if you want to, you can answer. But what is your opinion?
Yeah. So, in my opinion, I think we also discussed about this in last video. Mahayana philosophy attracted many Westerners. That is thanks to its philosophical depth. I don't see that type of depth in Theravada Buddhism that is being practiced in Sri Lanka. Or at least people are not really talking about it, or these concepts are not open enough to world from Sri Lankan environment. So that is the main reason I see. It's not only in Buddhism. If you look at Ramana Maharishi's teaching, and also in some Upanishad teachings, we see this non-duality topic has been spoken, in depth. So I think that is the main reason.
But if you look at the teachings in Abhidhamma under various sections like Chitta, Jaitisika, Rupa Nirvana, and I mean going into volumes and volumes, and so is Sutra Pitaka, some thousands of sutras, and no one can say that that was not sufficient. But what you are saying is the depth was not there. It's not the volume, but the depth was not there, and that's the reason why the Westerners had not been attracted by the Theravada tradition that much. There are some. And another reason, sorry, at the same time we can answer this. So for example, Ajahn family. Now see, most of the from like Amaravati temple in London and now even in Australia, a lot of Ajahn from Ajahn Sumedho to Ajahn Brahmavansa to. Now they went to Watpo Nanachat for Thai retreats, went into forest meditation. Again, it was not, I'm not, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying, Sri Lanka, what Sri Lanka is carrying is, anything inferior or anything. I'm not suggesting that. But again, now they didn't come here, but they went to Thailand instead. Something seems to be a problem somewhere.
Okay. Well, in my opinion, the typical Abhidharma Buddhist, the Abhidharma content is too much to grasp, right? So far, no one has actually spoken about Abhidharma in a simpler way. And if you look at these philosophical teachings that emerge from Mahayana Buddhism and also some Indian traditions, they try to touch both the hearts and mind of Westerners. Yeah. I think that's the main reason they attracted so many people towards them, which hasn't happened in Sri Lankan tradition. Maybe now it's the time.
Yeah, probably, because after all, I always use this simile. in my discussions in Buddha's biography, even the average people who haven't had any formal education, so Parker, Sunita, and Patachara, they all understood this in simple language. So there is no kind of there's no evidence that Buddha had asked any of these people to go and study my Abhidhamma. You know, there was no such thing. A simple communication had apparently done the trick, you know, with these. And in the, I think there's a, I can't remember whether it's Rajumala or a lady who was in the kitchen, and while Buddha was giving a sermon, and she was listening to it from the kitchen, and she understood apparently and attained Maggapala, you know. So as you said, it's communication to the heart. So before I conclude this session, this heart and mind, you know, addressing heart, just say something which is very important. Otherwise, it's trying to memorize words, you know, here in Sri Lanka.
So problem with this Abhidharma content is there is nothing wrong about Abhidharma content, but we also believe that Abhidharma can only be realized by a Buddha, because only Buddha, Samyak Sambuddha, has the ability to dissect our mind to that microscopic level. And then perhaps it's not that useful to discuss with people, because it will only end up as an information. That's why we need to deliver Dharma or spirituality in more of in a way that resonates with our hearts. So I think that's what these philosophers have done. So they really simplify this Dharma, and even that's what Buddha also did. He was not talking about, you know, the Dharma in a really complicated manner, right? It was very simple, and also it was not generalized. So that is the main reason that these type of teachings reach out to many people. The heart knows the way.
Exactly, because I have heard this from these various spiritual. I mean, it's the heart that matters, not your mind. So, Anuradha, before we come to a conclusion, I would like to kind of get the final conclusive words from you as to what you would pass on to the spiritual seekers in Sri Lanka and overseas, and those who are going through, you know, very, very traumatic conditions, especially after the COVID period, the real spiritual seekers. Just give them a message, and then we can conclude the session.
Yeah, so about the content in Buddhism or philosophies, we just need to be open mind. Then only we can really grasp this the deep philosophical aspects in the teaching. And apart from that, we should also cultivate more compassion towards others, and also integrate meditation in daily life, so that we would be able to handle tough situation in our life. And that would also lead to have more awareness in the society, because a society that is led by compassion and awareness is a better society.
Well, that's a wonderful message, and Anuradha, we are very thankful to you for joining us, and then elaborating on some of the things that the spiritual seekers ought to be doing. And you are actually speaking not as a academic or anyone who has studied, but you are a practitioner yourself, and you are a teacher yourself, and therefore we consider this session very important for our audience, who are essentially spiritual seekers looking for solace and peace within. So Anuradha, thanks again, and we will meet you next week with a different topic. Thank you very much, Anuradha.
Thanks for the opportunity. Let's meet in next week. Yeah.
All right. Okay.
Bye.
Bye-bye.